The property tax crisis facing many South Dakotan homeowners reminds me of the headstone on a grave that says, "I told you I was sick."
Welcome back to Searchlight Report, a podcast from South Dakota Searchlight. I'm Meghan O'Brien, and our podcast brings you up to date on policy and politics in the Mount Rushmore state. This week, we're looking at one of the most talked about topics in this year's legislative session, property tax relief. You just heard from Representative John Hughes, a Sioux Falls Republican. He and many other lawmakers are working to find ways to reduce property taxes. State lawmakers this year brought their own plans in the form of nearly 50 different proposals. For some, it would come in the form of higher sales tax rates, using the revenue to bring property taxes down. In other plans, it would come from ideas like legalizing statewide sports betting and devoting taxes on it to providing property tax relief, or welcoming data centers that would pay more property taxes to local governments. Where things have settled with 1 week to go in the legislative session is a package of 5 bills supported by the governor. They include plans to reduce property taxes by capturing revenue from a scheduled increase in the state sales tax rate and allowing counties to impose their own sales tax. But how did the state get to the point of needing this relief, and to the cusp of raising one tax to lower another? Some homeowners in recent years have seen their property tax bills rise by hundreds of dollars. Part of that comes from the population growth South Dakota experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. While then Governor Kristi Noem boasted the state's freedom from mask mandates and other health-related restrictions, thousands moved to the Rushmore state. New homeowners who came from states with higher income levels and home prices overbid the asking price for homes in areas including the Black Hills and Sioux Falls. Those higher market values inflated county assessments of surrounding homes, leading to skyrocketing property tax bills for some. State lawmakers started taking steps towards tax relief years ago, but instead of tackling property taxes, they focused on sales taxes. In 2023, they approved a temporary sales tax cut, what some described as the largest tax cut in the state's history. The sales tax rate went from 4.5% to 4.2%, saving consumers about $100 million and costing South Dakota's treasury the same amount. Then Representative Chris Carr, a Sioux Falls Republican, sponsored the plan in the House.
What are some of the benefits of this tax cut? Provides a much-needed tax relief, especially in a time when inflation's hitting our pocketbooks pretty hard. It's relatively easy to modify and implement. It's a broad tax cut that will minimize the market disruption. Basic economics tells us that less tax is going to create more discretionary dollars. It's going to lead to more spending. That's good for retailers. That's good for the folks in our state. It doesn't just cut a tax on one item. It's across all the items that I talked about. It's easily defined and calculable.
As the current legislature weighs its options for providing property tax relief, some lawmakers say the state sales tax reduction was the wrong decision. That includes Senator Amber Hulse, a Republican from Hot Springs.
Well, I guess I wish I was in the legislature in 2023, and I wish that, many of us here could have been a part of some of those discussions, because I think we potentially made a poor choice in how we gave tax relief.
The reduction will sunset next summer, returning the state sales tax rate to 4.5%. A pending plan would capture revenue from the increase for a property tax relief fund. And another proposal that succeeded on both sides of the legislature would allow counties to raise an additional sales tax and capture that revenue to provide property tax credits to homeowners. I'll be back with more on those plans after this break.
Hi, it's Clayton Henkel, Deputy Editor at NC Newsline. At State's Newsroom, we believe journalism should be fair, fearless, and free. With reporters working on the ground in all 50 states and Washington, D.C., we provide nonpartisan coverage of the state issues that matter most to you. You can subscribe to our work by going to statesnewsroom.com/subscribe.
As the sales tax cut from 2023 took effect, South Dakotans were saving a penny every time they spent $3.33. Homeowner property taxes were still going up for many and were hundreds or even thousands of dollars higher than a few years earlier. Last year's lawmakers had more than 20 proposals to sort through in search of the solution to the state's property tax problem. One by one, plans began to fail. A proposal from Republican Governor Larry Roden was the only one left standing at the end of the legislative session. It limits the increases in owner-occupied property assessments to 3% countywide for 5 years and exempts some home improvements from affecting assessments. It temporarily limits the value from new construction and growth that can be used to increase property tax collections. And it expands eligibility among disabled and elderly people for property tax assessment freeze programs, including increases in income limits. The governor's plan took effect in July. He said it would slow down increases in property taxes.
But there's more to do. And I want to emphasize this. We have not done anything with our efforts to bring property tax relief to some areas to South Dakota. We need to deliver meaningful property tax relief and actual property tax cuts for South Dakotans. And we need to find a way to do it without making the state or counties or school districts go broke.
For Roden, that desire to do more took the form of a proposed sales tax option for counties, which currently can't charge sales taxes. He announced the plan last year, intending to bring it forward during this year's legislative session. Meanwhile, a group of lawmakers met as a task force following last year's legislative session. The group emerged with 19 proposals to reduce property taxes. Some of the plans included higher sales taxes, using revenue to provide tax credits to homeowners. Others wanted to find ways to cut state spending by 5%, saving the state $123 million to use for homeowner tax credits. Lawmakers this year brought those plans to the legislative session. We'll take a look at how legislators narrowed down those ideas after this short break.
Hi, this is Seth Tupper, editor at South Dakota Searchlight. Our team covers the most important conversations happening at the state capitol every day of the legislative session. We cover plans to tackle property tax relief and funding for public schools, as well as conversations around reproductive rights and data centers. You can find all that and more at SouthDakotaSearchlight.com, where you can also subscribe to our free newsletter and donate to sustain our journalism into the future.
After last year's property tax relief task force yielded more than a dozen plans, state lawmakers had their work cut out for them. That became even more clear when there were 46 bills introduced, all with the hope of becoming part of the solution for rising property taxes. Some of the plans were statewide solutions, like raising the state sales tax to 5%. Some had more of a local focus or would change how an owner-occupied property tax is assessed. As bill after bill fell in committee hearings and floor debates, the governor this week threw his support behind a package of bills, including his optional county sales tax. The package includes an idea he hadn't previously supported, using money from the scheduled increase in the statewide sales tax to help with property tax relief. The governor and Republican legislative leadership unveiled the package of bills this week. Assistant House Majority Leader Marty Overweg, a Republican from New Holland, spoke about the plan in a press conference.
It has to be both chambers and the governor working together, both giving and both receiving some things what they like. For me personally, it's really hard for me to like sales tax for property tax relief. But I know that if I want to get something done, then you have to be willing to listen to anybody else, whether it's Governor Roden or whether it's the Senate. Look at their plans, and at the end of the day, we need to put something together because we are here to serve the people of South Dakota.
This year's deal includes 5 bills, one of which is already on its way to the governor's desk. That one, Senate Bill 96, is the plan that Roden's been floating around the Capitol the longest. His budget commissioner testified in favor of the bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jim Terwilliger with the Bureau of Finance and Management. Here today representing Governor Roden on behalf of Senate Bill 96. This legislation has been really almost a year in the making. After last legislative session, we got our heads together to think about different ways to really move the needle on property taxes. The plan in Senate Bill 96 is simple, it's optional. target at the areas in the state that need the most tax relief, and would target owner-occupied tax relief by replacing each county, or providing each county with the option to directly reduce owner-occupied taxes by allowing up to a 0.5% optional county sales tax. And so, as we've looked at a lot of data over the last year, one of the things that was very clear when we looked at that data, but as we've looked at this data over the last 5 years, the tax burden for owner-occupied has grown by about $250 million. And of that growth, about 60% of that burden has come from 3 counties. Lincoln County is the highest in the state right now. It's at $5,200. Union County, $4,300. Minnehaha County, a little over $4,000. Pennington County, close to $4,000. Other areas of the state, some of the rural areas, not as much. Han County at $1,100, Day County, $1,700, Tripp County at $1,100. And so it was very clear as we looked at that data that a targeted option really made a lot of sense.
The governor's office says the counties that are suffering the most from property tax increases are also the counties with the most visitors paying sales taxes. That's why it makes sense to give those counties the option to use sales taxes for property tax relief, the office says. Opponents to the plan worry that it could shift burdens. It imposes a higher burden on people from smaller communities who might not see that return on property tax relief, according to Representative Will Mortensen, a Republican from Fort Pierre.
Yeah, I rise in opposition to this bill today, and it's a new tax. It's a new 0.5-cent tax bill. It would authorize that state over, and when that sunset expires, it would allow counties to take it to to 5%. So it's a new tax. I'm not really opposed to it today because it's a tax bill. I'm opposed to it today because this is a redistribution bill. This is fundamentally a redistribution bill. From whom to whom? From the poorest South Dakotans to the richest South Dakotans, and from the poorest counties to the richest counties. When we hear about these visitors, they don't just come from out of state. They come from our rural communities. And because this bill is structured that the property tax cut goes to where the economic activity goes, you know who's getting the biggest tax cut? The people in the biggest houses in the biggest towns.
Senate Bill 96 passed through both chambers of the legislature and now goes to Rodin's desk for final approval. It's planned to work alongside Senate Bill 245, sponsored by Speaker of the House John Hanson, a Del Rapids Republican who's challenging Rodin for the Republican nomination for governor in June.
Just mechanically, on Senate Bill 245, what this bill would do is it creates a special fund. It's called the Homeowner Property Tax Reduction Fund. You know, we used to have a property tax reduction fund in the state. It got eliminated a few years back. We're going to bring that back. And then, as you all are aware, next year, our sunset on our sales tax is set to trigger. And what I mean by that is our sales tax rate is set to go from 4.2 to 4.5%. And that's going to mean approximately $110 million of revenue is going to come into Pierre. Now, just personally, at the time that we did that sales tax cut, I wanted to make it permanent. The next year we tried to make it permanent. We couldn't make it permanent. Even this year we tried to make it permanent. We couldn't make it permanent. I think the next best thing to do is to say, with that revenue that's coming in, that was originally dedicated to tax relief, we're going to put it back in dollar for dollar to more tax relief for the people of this state. I cannot think of a better use of that revenue. And so this proposal is going to take that $110 million from the 4.2 to 4.5%, put it in the property tax reduction fund, and put it immediately back into the pockets of the people in the form of tax relief. I think that's a strong plan. Now, there's one little hiccup to that, which is that sunset isn't set to trigger until next year, 2027, July 2027. And so what this proposal also would do is use one-time money to bridge that gap. And so we're going to take money that we have in savings under this proposal and essentially use it to give it back to the people in the form of tax relief.
That bill is scheduled for a hearing in the House of Representatives next week. 3 other bills moving through the legislature now could work alongside those bills, according to Rodin's plan. House Bill 1253 caps annual property assessment growth at 5% for 5 years at a time and resets those assessments to market value every 5 years. That will be in the Senate next week. House Bill 1323 gives citizens an additional 10 days to get signatures to force an election on a school board's decision to opt out of the state's property tax cap and collect more revenue. That's also scheduled to be heard in the Senate next week. The fifth bill is House Bill 1051, which reduces the maximum tax levies for school districts. That's set to be heard by the Joint Budget Setting Committee. The governor's office estimates that South Dakota homeowners could save an average of $1,200 on their property taxes if the entire package is adopted and they live in a county that enacts the sales tax option for property tax relief. State Budget Commissioner Jim Terwilliger has estimated that the higher sales tax rate could amount to $160 in extra expenses for a family of 4. That's all we have for this week on Searchlight Report. The podcast is based on reporting by South Dakota Searchlight's staff, editor Seth Tupper, senior reporter John Holt, and reporters Joshua Heyer, Mackenzie Huber, and me. I write the scripts and produce the audio with editing by Seth Tupper. Audio this week came from recordings by South Dakota Searchlight and legislative live streams provided by South Dakota Public Broadcasting. South Dakota Searchlight is part of States Newsroom, the nation's largest nonprofit news organization. Until next time, I'm South Dakota Searchlight's Meghan O'Brien with the Searchlight Report.